Hi, this is Art, and this is from my book, One More Hug. I'd like to tell you about the time that I almost blew up one town and several of the surrounding villages. As a young man, I spent 4 years in the United States Army, and for much of that time I was assigned to a missile site in central Germany. The Nike Hercules missile was a solid-fueled surface-to-air missile that had been developed during the Cold War to destroy formations of enemy bombers. It was 41.5 feet long, with a wingspan of over 6 feet. It had a range of 77 miles and a top speed of Mach 3.65. It could be fitted with a conventional fragmenting warhead or a nuclear warhead. The missile was eventually replaced by the Patriot missile, which, as far as I know, is still in use today. Our mission at D Battery, as with all NATO sites, was to be capable of firing the missiles within minutes. The missiles were housed in hangars that we referred to as barns, and each barn had a letter designation: A section, B section, C section. Well, shortly after making sergeant, I was named section chief of A section, a job that was usually reserved for older, more experienced, and more deserving NCOs. In addition to my regular job as section chief, all NCOs had to pull a 24-hour stint as section chief on duty on a rotating basis. Well, one Sunday morning, I was serving the last few hours of a 24-hour stint as section chief on duty. One of my last official acts before being relieved by the next guy was to take a crew of men into the sections and perform a series of checks. This was a routine that was performed every morning by the section chief on duty. It usually took about an hour, but if you cut a few corners, you could usually be back in the ready room in 45 minutes. I gathered up all of the crewmen on duty and we headed for the sections. I remember it was a particularly beautiful morning. The sky was blue and the air was crisp. And our first stop was A section. Well, as soon as we entered the barn, it was obvious to all of us that something was amiss. There was a flashing red light and, as I recall, some kind of a low-volume alarm, sounding something like a modern-day car alarm, but at a lower volume. This wasn't supposed to be happening. I had performed that check 100 times, and this was not something that was supposed to be happening. As I looked at all of the faces in front of me, I suddenly realized that they were all looking at me. I was 22 years old, I was a kid, but I was the sergeant, I was the ranking man. I was the one in charge, and this was my problem to solve. It was one of those rare times in my adult life when I was really scared, like a little kid gets scared. Each of those missiles had enough firepower to, well, I really can't tell you that, but suffice it to say that you would have been scared too. I pointed to two of the men, and I said, "You two will stay here with me. Everyone else clear the sections. When you get back to the ready room, have someone inform fire control that we have a problem. This could turn out to be very serious." And with that, everyone except the three of us left the barn. I grabbed the manual and I said, "We're going to go strictly by the book on this one. I will read the step." And then pointing to crewman 1, I said, "You will perform the step." Then pointing to crewman 2, "You will check the step." I then turned to the section marked "Catastrophic Sunday Morning Disasters that can end your life and the lives of everyone you know," and I began to read. I read step 1. Crewman 1, check. Crewman 2, check. We went through 7 or 8 checks that way until I heard crewman 1 say, "Hey, the cable is loose." He shoved the loose cable back into its receptacle, and the noise stopped. The red light was no longer flashing. The three of us just stood there staring at each other for several seconds. It would be literally impossible for me to describe my thoughts at that moment. They say that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the conquest of it. Perhaps my fear that Sunday morning had been unfounded, but fear is like that. It often strikes irrationally. What is terribly frightening to one person may be exhilarating to another, and vice versa. I do believe that my relief at that instant was overshadowed by my pride at the way I had handled my fear. I had acted rationally and responsibly, and it had paid off. When we completed our checks in all sections, I thanked my comrades for staying with me, and the three of us headed outside toward the Ready Building. The sky was blue and the air was crisp that Sunday morning, and this was indeed going to be one lovely day. Thanks for watching. Oh, and by the way, if you like my vlogs, you can become a subscriber at the bottom of your screen. It's free, and it'll help me out. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up, too. Thanks.